The prevailing narratives told about Africa for too long have been largely told through the same persistent and negative stereotypes and frames of poverty, disease, conflict, poor leadership, and corruption. Studies have shown that news about Africa is majorly focused on conflict, terrorism, disasters, diseases, and other tragedies. The viewers and listeners of these stories oftentimes take them for ultimate truth, informing their only understanding of the continent, until they have a first-hand experience of Africa.
If we're to look back, we recognize that the perception that exists of us has actually been designed to ensure that we remain captive mentally. Because once you can create a perception of a person as lower, as unsophisticated, as little, then what happens is you begin to actually manifest that future. And if they can believe that perception of themselves, they will also begin to manifest that future. And so it makes it easier for you to dominate them. So ultimately, the perception that exists of us is one that has been created in order to dominate us. And if we are to change that perception, we must ask ourselves, who are we? Who were we? And who do we want to become?
For some of us that were able to travel abroad for school, specifically for university, we were victims of a lot of ignorance from international students and other people who just didn't seem to know much about where we came from. And it's very common for the average African when they're abroad to be asked if back home they ride on animals like lions and elephants. And it contributed to the culture shock a lot to people that moved abroad, whether it was for school or just relocated.
You hear things like, people making reference to Africa as if it's a country. You hear sometimes people are shocked that you have internet, that you're on social media, But coming specifically to our own industry, you have sometimes when people look at your art and they're trying to tell you that it's not African art, So they're questioning your authenticity. They have a preconceived notion of what African art should be. And the truth is, what is art from anywhere else? What is European art? What is American art? You understand? The original occupants of America were not the people that we see there today.
I was having a conversation with people that were in my dorm this one evening. We were having dinner. And I said something and I didn't realize that it caught everybody's attention till everybody went quiet. I said, something back home when my driver would, and then everyone goes, "You're a driver." And I was like, no, back home it's very normal to have a driver because there's a lot of domestic responsibilities that the driver helps with, like going to buy diesel because we have power issues, so we use generators. So you had to now start explaining. But no, they just believed that, no, you have a driver, no, you're royalty, you live in a palace. And then, of course, they would ask if you ride animals, if back home, everything that they see in Western media and pop culture about Africa was true.
While we've exported slaves and we've exported natural resources, out of the continent, there's still the idea that the things that are in Africa are not yet ready as they are, and that they must be subjected to some sort of foreign protocol for which it becomes acceptable. And I think that that's one big misconception about Africa, that in itself it is not sufficient. It really is, and we are. We have the manpower, we have the skill, we have the creativity, and our stories are beginning to be told on a more vivid stage.
I think the people who suffer the brunt of this conceptualizations are really the women. It's ultimately the African women, because the way the world has perceived it is designed African women to be at the bottom. So we look at our women and we don't think of them as worthy of what it is that everyone else is worthy of. We look at our women and we say, we prefer the Yoruba women. They're more beautiful because they're always on TV. We look at our women and we want them to remove their natural hair and put on the hair of the Westerners. So it's all, the perception has been designed, as I said before, to dominate and control us. And ultimately it's our responsibility to decide if we're ready to change it.
Despite years of independence, Africans still don't hold the pen when it comes to writing Africa's story. The people of Africa have been traumatized. European colonizers denigrated them for centuries as subhumans and denied them recognition of any meaningful intellectual, cultural, and historical accomplishment or experience.
The world is discovering the untold story. And that untold story is right here in Africa, in Nigeria. We found our voice and we found a way to tell our story in ways that the world is beginning to realize that there's something here. There are loads of artists who are earning a very comfortable, good living, selling their art. And a lot of their collectors are not in Nigeria. They are sending their works out of Nigeria. In fact, we're beginning to even struggle with that.
Social media platforms are now providing Africans with an opportunity to counter negative stereotypes by giving them representational agency. There is a space for brand storytellers to depict the ingenuity, innovation, and hurt of Africans in a way which does not ignore the socio-economic challenges. In fact, in a way that brings change on the socio-economic level. It is important that we do tell the whole story.
Technology is a great leveler, and our access to technology, the proliferation of technology, has meant that we can tell more diverse stories and we can really see the breadth of diversity that comes out of the African continent. So when we appreciate that rawness that comes out of Africa, all that diversity that comes out of Africa, we have to be careful not to subject it again to a secondary level of criticism where we say it's not good enough as it is. It needs to have an Oscar. It needs to have a Grammy for it to be. No, it doesn't need to have any of those things. Those are conceptions built with certain protocols in mind, and fair play to them, but they're just not enough to be able to even evaluate or contain what Africa has to offer. So in and of ourselves, we are enough.
Access to social media now, a platform that is free, that allows everybody to have, their own different profiles that where they can share their own stories and promote their own work, which is, primarily what promotes what we do in my companies, has really helped us a lot. And first of all, social media brings the world together, right? It makes everywhere just seem a lot closer. It makes the world a lot smaller. So I could be here in Abuja and I'm pushing out sports content and I'm promoting grassroots sports like Dembe, for example, from northern Nigeria. And somebody on the other side of the world in Asia or in the UK or in the US could see this, and then they've learned something new about Nigeria or my culture.
We believe that there is so much more to learn and experience about this beautiful continent, and we want you to be able to do that without any preconceived notions or misinformation standing in your way.
I think that we as Africans, now finding our voice should, continue to do the things that we do and speak very loudly for people to hear us, because African art is art made by Africans. If you've been affected by colonialism, if you've been affected by religion, if you've been affected by some Western cultures, then all of that becomes a part of who you are. And no one should tell you not to express that, in your art.
I mean, I can posit that one of the things that we can do is look at our rhythm, look at our art, look at our storytelling, look at the vibrancy that all of those things bring. I say we want to be able to be the vivid storytellers, on the global stage. That's just one way, but somebody else can sit down and say, okay, we can do this instead. So I think a big gap and a misconception is that the African reality for the future as it is set. It isn't. There's still the opportunity for people to sit down and play their parts, reach out to their counterparts in other countries, and to be able to build a cohesive African vision that ensures our survival the same way Europe would do for their own survival.
You cannot have somebody else tell your own story and expect it to be your narrative. So we need to have Africans telling their own stories. It is imperative that true, authentic African stories are best told from within the African context because they are such a deeply ingrained part of the culture. This is why at TOS TV Network, we pride ourselves in being Africa's chief storyteller.